Hello everyone. This is the second video in the series on a different look at autism and other diagnoses. In the first video we talked about underlying reasons for autism-specific behavior that are often overlooked. And that behavior that is perceived as autistic can have its roots in things like caution, alertness, uncertainty, tension and fear. And in case you have missed the first video, you can watch it here or there. In this second part of the series, we are going to have a look at one specific type of behavior that is perceived as autistic behavior. And we are going to see if we can also explain that behavior by other underlying causes like the ones we just spoke about: tension, fear, uncertainty, caution and alertness. In the field of mental health care, one of the typical or behavior type that is being labeled as autistic is called executive functions. But what do they mean with executive functions? Well, let me show you. Even kijken. So, executive functions is something like this. You have an idea, you make a plan, and you take action. Or in other words, you execute the plan, you execute your idea. That is an executive function. Now, what would happen if you are having some problems with executive functions? Things like these could happen. You could have difficulties with being social to others. You could experience difficulties in perform goal-oriented behavior, and you can experience difficulties in being efficient at what you do. To be good at executive functions, you need things like impulse control, flexibility, concentration, and setting priorities. These things have a positive influence on executive functions and therefore also a positive influence on being social to others, perform goal-oriented behavior, or be efficient at what you do. What I have learned about people with a label autism is that it works like this. A person has autism, therefore he or she is not very well at executive functions, so he or she is not doing very well in performing certain tasks like being social to others, perform goal-oriented behavior, or be efficient at what you do. This is what I've learned. Now, here is when things are becoming interesting, because what would happen if we swap the label autism with things like fear, caution, alertness, tension, uncertainty? You can pick one, they are all related, but let's go with fear. Fear can have a negative effect on performance. For example, when we take being social to others, you can imagine, I think, pretty well that when you have a fear for example, judgment of others or not performing well, you get insecure, maybe your tension rises, and this will have an inhibitory effect on being social to others, so you will perform less. And it looks kind of like this then. We can skip the autism label and say that fear, alertness, tension, uncertainty has an inhibitory effect on your performance to be able to be social to others. Let's talk about that fear a little bit more, because maybe you remember it from the last video, part 1, when I said that being afraid is normal and it has a function. You can check the video here or there. I don't know where it will pop up, but that will bring you to the first video. In that video I said being afraid is normal and has a function. This is that function. Fear is a basic survival mechanism. It helps you to survive. Nowadays it's not that useful anymore. It's still very useful, but we have created our own environment to live in. For the vast majority of the time that we have lived on this planet, we were living with nature. We were a part of nature, and fear helps you to survive. So that is a big plus. It's something helpful. It gains you something, and I want to illustrate that to you. And for the sake of simplicity, just a small recap. We were talking earlier about executive functions. Let's make it simple. Just talk about performing tasks. So fear has an inhibitory effect on performing tasks. And to illustrate that, I want to show you something that when you encounter that in real life, you should be afraid of that. Imagine yourself walking in a forest, and not nowadays, but in the old days, like thousands of years ago. Animals were still walking around, living wild, and your fear was still very helpful for you to survive. And you hear something in the bushes very nearby, and your fear grasps your attention. Your focus is going on high alert, and you check the bushes and you see this. 2 lions, and the left one, she is clearly preparing for an attack. At this moment, your fear helps you to survive. You freeze or you immediately start running, but all the basic mechanisms start working to help you to survive, or at least give you a better chance to survive. And the thing that I want to say with this example is that right now, if you are in this situation, you will not be able to perform tasks. Like executive functions and performing tasks are things like making your homework on time, or what we talked about earlier is being social. If you are in this situation, you will not be able to be social to others. You will run for your life or freeze and hope that they won't eat you. So the point that I want to make here is that fear nowadays has an inhibitory effect on performance, on daily tasks we should be doing right now. But for the vast majority of time that we have lived on this planet together, fear was a basic mechanism to survive, and it was very, very helpful. In this example, where you can be eaten by a lion, the relation between fear and not be able to perform certain tasks, like making homework, I think is quite clear. But this is how fear helped us in the older days, the old days. Right now, things are a little bit different. So imagine that you still have fear, but it's more subtle than it was in the example with the lions. The effects are still the same. fear can still have an inhibitory effect on performing tasks. So let me give an example of how fear would have a negative effect on executive functions or be able to perform right now. So let's take the example of making homework. When you have fear of not performing well on your homework or not to be able to finish it on time, or maybe you fear judgment of your teacher, or maybe judgment from your parents. There are many reasons that can provoke a certain fear, or maybe tension, or maybe uncertainty. It's all related, but they all can have a negative effect on performing tasks like making homework. Nowadays, a subtle form of fear can have a negative influence on performing many tasks that are being seen as important today in our daily lives. One example is making homework, but you can also think about making a test, for example, or applying for a job. When you have a fear of being judged in a negative way, or any other reason why you are afraid, this will have a negative influence on performing when you are applying for a job. When you look at the opposite of fear, you will also see an opposite effect on executive functions. The opposite of fear is feeling safe or trust. And that feeling of safety, of trusting your environment, for example, has a positive influence on your concentration. If you feel safe, you are better at, or you are more able to concentrate. And concentration is a part of executive functions. So this is also related. If you are feeling safe, if you have feelings of trust, in the end you will be better at performing tasks like making homework, or making a test, or applying for a job. To strengthen my message about executive functions and fear, or the opposite of fear, I will ask you to imagine something again, and I want to ask you to imagine that you have to make a difficult task in a room. And you can close your eyes if you want, or keep them open, it's up to you. But please try to imagine that you are in this room, you are making this test, and you feel absolutely safe. It's a nice room, you feel good. There is just you trust your environment, everything is okay. Can you imagine that this will help you to concentrate, and therefore having a positive effect on making the test, right? Okay, keep imagining, but now imagine that you feel not so safe in that room. You have a certain level of tension, or maybe fear. And this is because there is a person walking around in that room, keeping a very close eye on you. And he or she is keeping an eye on you because if you don't perform well enough, he will most certainly hurt you and cause you pain. Can you imagine that this will distract you from performing? Your fear of the pain, your fear of the consequences, they will have a negative effect on your concentration, for example, and also a negative effect on you performing on the test, on the task. This example, this imagining making a test situation is a very clear example. It makes very clear that having a form of fear can have a negative effect on your performance. But what if you have a form of fear that is a lot more subtle, that is present, but you're not very aware of it? It's like it has been there for years, just on small levels, small amounts. That also can have an effect on performance, like being less able to concentrate well. Maybe you start worrying more quickly, or you start worrying more. And also, if you are afraid of a negative outcome, it can make you want to control the situation more. So maybe you are more focused on controlling things that are present in your environment. Also, fear can make you want to stick to the known and therefore be less flexible in situations. All of these things can have an influence on performing tasks. And here's the thing. This influence on performing tasks can be seen by a psychologist as difficulties with executive functions, and therefore contributing to a label autism. All of these examples and things that influence each other may seem complex, but in the end it can be told, this story can be told quite simple, and that is that a subtle or underlying form of fear can contribute to a label autism. The example of executive functions is just one example of autism-specific behavior that can be explained by a form of fear. In the following videos, I want to dive a little bit deeper into autism-specific behavior and explain it from one form of fear or uncertainty, or one of the other things we talked about. But for now, I want to conclude that autism-specific behaviors can also be caused by basic mechanisms that are normal for people like you and me. If you found this video interesting, you can give this video a thumbs up. And I'm also curious about your thoughts, maybe your experiences, or what you think about the story that I have told so far. You can leave a comment down below in the comment section, and I love to hear about that, and hope to see you in the next video. Bye!